From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here, and we've got an interesting topic for you this morning on a Tuesday, one that I think is important. All the more so because of what just happened within the past 24 hours. We had scheduled a program this morning to talk about the holidays coming upon us. It can be a joyous time for a lot of people, but on the other hand, it can also sometimes be a very difficult time for folks. Depression, dealing with that if you're alone or if you've lost a loved one or something along those lines. Well, coinciding, of course, with that topic and the holidays, well, we're kind of transitioning a bit after this horrible school bus wreck in Chattanooga, and the situation there with the loss right now we know of at least 5 children's lives in that wreck, along with many others hurt just as they're embarking on Thanksgiving. Can't even imagine the grief, for the parents and the families of the children that were lost, but of course everyone else there who's watched it, and even those of you following it in the news here in Nashville or elsewhere. In fact, on my Facebook page, so many of you have commented about prayers and thoughts for the families and those who lost loved ones, but also wondering and asking the question, how on earth could I or anyone deal with this type of grief? And that's a great question. And how do you go through this? We can take some calls and would be interested in hearing from you as well, but we've got an expert on this morning to talk to us about that and dealing with it and what kind of help is out there with us. This morning, Dr. Karen Ray is with us, the Chief Medical Officer for CenterStone here, and it's really nice to have you on.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for coming. We were going to talk about holidays and the depression that goes with that, but now you, for these folks in Chattanooga, are dealing not only with the holidays, but of course losing loved ones. It's just unimaginable, isn't it? I can't even think about what these parents are going through.
Well, I think you've covered really well the terrible shock that people must feel.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and of course that shock and feeling overwhelmed is really the first stage of grief. And then there's the sort of sense that comes a little later about how terribly unfair this is.
Yeah.
Terribly unfair that children lost their lives. And I think even a sense that it's unfair that it happened at a holiday season when we're supposed to be celebrating.
Right. The thing about, first I should say, CenterStone, and let's tell folks a little bit about that. Oftentimes we'll send grief counselors sometimes to locations where things like this happen. In fact, you may have counselors heading that way to Chattanooga. We don't know for certain yet. It's just happening. But talk about CenterStone and the role some of your counselors play when you go into these areas.
Well, CenterStone, of course, is a behavioral health provider organization. We have about 19 clinics throughout the Middle Tennessee area, and our services do extend to Chattanooga. And as part of our organization, we have a specialized crisis team. And so they're involved when school tragedies occur, actually sometimes when there are tragedies in the NFL.
Yeah, you said NFL is one of your clients.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's really possible that our crisis team has already been called to assist in the grief counseling in Chattanooga.
And it wouldn't just be for, obviously, first and foremost, the families of the deceased, but everyone else. And I would imagine there are people here in this market that are watching and following this that are very upset about it, or look at their own children and think about this. So what is the first step at this point for your counselors, if they're indeed there, if someone here is seeking out help? What do you do? I mean, I can't imagine how you can help.
Well, I think the initial focus will be with the students, most likely with other bus drivers, and especially also with the teachers.
Yeah.
So there will be a reach out to the people who are in that setting to assist them in dealing with the grief, and then to help identify the individuals who need further professional help.
You wonder about moving forward and how you make these types of calls on, I understand the elementary school that was involved here is having classes today. I think the director of school said, look, if you want to stay home today, we totally understand. But if you come to school, the teachers will be there. I assume other school buses were running this morning after what happened. But of course, everyone's got to be feeling it. Is there something to be said for trying to move on with your life while not ignoring the situation, but having classes today?
Well, I think one of the major strategies is to keep the routine going. And there will be certainly children and families, and I would imagine some teachers who would feel unable to keep that routine going, and that will be fine. But for a large percentage, keeping the routine in place will be reassuring.
Yeah, knowing that life, I guess, is going on, but at the same time, they may be at school. And I always hear about cases where counselors are at school for, be it teachers or students, to talk. Typically, they're there to just listen. I mean, you assume that the students then will seek them out, or the teachers will seek them out. And what do they go into a room that's set aside and sit down and talk, or what happens?
Well, I think there are routinely school counselors, but this will be larger
for maybe more
than
students
the school
with the
would
needs.
be prepared, and because it would include the teachers, the bus drivers, other school staff, and students. So there will be, I think, special efforts made to include more people in this. And then the standard counselors who are on site, there will be some decision about also how they would be able to continue on as the weeks pass. But this is a little bit more complicated because many of the schools in Nashville are already out for the week. So there's going to be a break in the school
You would
routine.
suspect even some of the schools here in Nashville, because this is such a big news story, students have taken note that youngsters their own age have died in Chattanooga, and it could have effect on children anywhere. This is a national story now.
Right, it is, and I think it's initially very frightening. Parents will reassure their children. Parents will be fearful. It's always that, it could have been my child.
Right.
I'm just fortunate that it wasn't my child.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a big thought.
Well, so many people now wondering, waiting for answers. I want to say this. A lot of parents, you can overreact, and everyone reacts to things differently. I want to talk about how folks handle it differently, but keep this in mind. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's not your expertise. But school buses today remain the safest mode of transportation on our roads in this country. It's not even close. Many more children die every single day, I hate to say it, in automobile accidents than in school buses. Of course, a case like this comes along, and I've had on my Facebook page so many parents so fearful, like you said, saying, well, I don't want my children to ride a bus. I'll tell you right now, I feel more comfortable with my son taking a bus to school this morning than me driving him. It's not because I'm a bad driver. It just means if someone else slams into me in my Honda, I'm in some trouble.
Right.
Someone else slams into a school bus 99.9% of the time. The person who slams into the bus is going to be in trouble, but the bus is huge, it's big, it's safe, and you're going to be okay.
Right.
So, I mean, is there something to be said for trying to get past the emotion and remaining rational? Because I get a sense a lot of parents today are saying, well, my son or daughter's never going to be on a school bus again. And to me, that's an irrational choice.
Well, but I think more focus, the media will place more focus on that. If you've just done
just
that.
to try to put out the stats. I know it's scary, and this is horrible what happened in Chattanooga, but people sometimes overreact, or get to the point where you say, I'm not even letting my child out of the house today, which maybe in a short term is fine, but how do you get past that?
Well, I think people will go, that will be a phase. People will then listen to the facts, and they will eventually return their children. Most people will allow their children to ride the school bus. I think the school systems will reevaluate safety, any other issues that they may find out from investigation of this, and they will attempt to correct anything that looks like other principles could be applied to keep the bus safer.
Oh, I agree. And then we're going to take a break. When we come back, some calls are coming in. We'll take those. One of those big issues, and again, that's going to be a topic for another show, is the question of seatbelts on school buses. We have no idea if seatbelts on this bus in Chattanooga would have saved lives, but that's an issue that comes up. Also, the question of the bus driver, who, of course, this morning is charged with 5 counts of vehicular homicide. So we'll find out about that. But anyway, we're going to talk more about the grief, dealing with it, and the stress of it, especially coming around the holidays. It's tough. The number 737-7587 is the number. If you're on hold, stay there. Lee, Brian, and others will get to you. We have lines open. If you want to share your thoughts or your feelings this morning, join us. We'll be back with more right after this.